Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. In a hilarious display of utter incompetence, the SEC failed to file Form C, which is required to appeal Judge Torres' decision in the SEC v. Ripple case. The deadline was last night at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, so that'd be October 16th. That was the deadline, and the deadline came, the deadline passed, and there was no filing, which left all of us here in the XRP communities just in stunned amazement, but also scratching our heads. What does this mean? Did we get the date wrong? Is this not when the SEC was supposed to have filed by? That would be weird, because even Stuart Alderati, Ripple's chief legal officer, said, yeah, that's the date. So what the heck was going on? Did this mean that the SEC was no longer going to appeal? And so, admittedly, I was recording a video about this in the immediate aftermath of this, just trying to get everybody caught up to speed. And when I recorded that, I was very upfront. I was like, I still don't know for sure what's going on. Here's everything I've found. So that was my very last video about 12 hours ago. And I admit, and I said it at the time, I was like, I would be absolutely shocked if the SEC just accidentally didn't file this form in order to appeal. I was like, that's hard for me to believe. I'm highly skeptical of that. But now here we are 12 hours later, and it does seem like it's a virtual certainty, about 99.9% from everything I've seen right now, that it is in fact the case the SEC just accidentally didn't file the appeal. They just accidentally didn't. So I'll tell you this, it's a couple things at the outset, and then I'll give you all the specifics. The SEC has indicated today, in the aftermath of all this, we have a good bit of additional information here, that yes, they are indeed still going to appeal. So we know that. So they missed the deadline. They're still going to appeal, even though they didn't admit that they missed the deadline. Like, I've got a comment from Brad Garlinghouse on that, which is going to put some pieces together too for you. Also, there is an indication on a particular form, that, and I'll show you a little bit later in the video, indicating that if the SEC didn't appeal and file the Form C on time, that it would result in the dismissal of their appeal. Turns out that's actually not quite accurate, and I will explain why. So I'm willing to bet the appeal will still go forward. It just is the case that these asshat pricks don't know how to file paperwork. But before going any further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. And so to everybody that said last night, April 16th, that was the deadline at 11:59 p.m., October 16th, everyone that said that was correct. And there was some uncertainty. I covered that pretty in depth in my last video, so I'm not going to delve too much into that. But credit to everybody that said, hey, October 16th is the correct date. Yes, you absolutely nailed it. And so here you can see this is the original notice of appeal filed by the SEC on October 2nd. So once that happens, the day after this is filed, that's when the timer starts. There's a 14-day timer that starts the day after the notice of appeal is filed. So the first day would be October 3rd, not October 4th. There's some people that were saying that, and they were utterly incorrect. But, of course, in the aftermath of all of this, there are a lot of people that were supposing a lot of things. We were just working as a community to try and figure stuff out, so that's fine. But that did bring us to October 16th. And so there's this post, and I'm not going to reread this here. You can pause and read it if you want. But, Attorney Hogan was kind of confused by this, too. We all were. Everybody. Every attorney that I was following that was opining on this in real time was like, what's going on here? We were in such stunned amazement that they didn't file. We're like, wait a minute. Do they know something about the schedule? Are we getting something wrong about the scheduling? And so here he was even kind of second-guessing himself, trying to find some sort of flaw in the logic of why wasn't Form C filed today. And so he was kind of hesitant to state firmly that they missed it. And I can understand why, because it is that absurd that the SEC wouldn't file a form this consequential on time. That is ridiculous. The incompetency here knows no bounds. But you know what also knows no bounds is their complete arrogance. These are just these people, if you want to use that term, it's not quite accurate, over at the SEC, because they are spawns of Satan. They are winged creatures from the depths below. That's what they are. My God, I'm still amazed that this is real life. I really am amazed. And so here I was an hour before this is my post on the screen. I was like, another hour, 9 minutes. And, if they don't file, then I guess it's dismissed. And that's what Attorney Hogan wrote back. He's like, well, I guess we're going to see here. There is also this post. This is by Fox Business journalist Eleanor Terrett. So this was at 11:28 p.m. My time, Central, which means that it was about a half hour after the deadline passed. And she, like everybody else, was confused by this as well. Why didn't we see anything? And so she wrote, there's no PACER filing, and all the lawyers I've spoken to, including Ripple's general counsel, said that October 16th was the deadline. I find it really hard to believe the SEC would just let this important deadline sail by, but, shrug emoji. Reached out to SEC and Stuart Alderati for comment. Yeah, and so again, October 16th, that was the proper deadline. We now know that. And I was with her. I was feeling the same thing. Hard to believe the SEC would just not file on time, but this is the world we live in. Just want to clear this up too. There was this post from Eleanor Terrett. This is at 12:07 a.m. Central Time, my time zone, so a little over an hour after the deadline had passed. And she wrote the following: "New, according to this document filed in the Second Circuit, the SEC's notice of appeal was filed on the 2nd, but not docketed until the 4th, meaning October 4th. So it seems the real deadline is actually Friday, October 18th, 11:59 p.m." And so certainly no diss on Eleanor Terrett whatsoever. She was doing her best to share information in an uncertain time. She didn't promise for sure that this is the case. She wrote that it seems this is the deadline, not absolutely promising that because it was a very fluid situation. We're still trying to figure stuff out, but it turns out this actually is incorrect rather. So it was not October 18th, but I wanted to share this because I'm sure a lot of you, especially if you're on social media, you probably already saw the October 18th date. That's not true. And somebody named Crypto Arsenal asked Attorney James Murphy, why isn't that correct? And Attorney Murphy simply wrote, that notice does not pertain to Form C. So there you go. Form C is what had to be filed. What we found here about this being docketed on October 4th, it's a completely different document, not Form C. So that wasn't the case either. There's also this. Eleanor Terrett shared this. Last thing before I hit the hay, entry number 1. Notice of civil appeal has a date of October 3rd and an enter date of October 4th. So could the SEC argue it had leeway to file by the 18th? I'll hopefully get comments back from all relevant parties in the AM. And that was posted at 1:25 a.m. Central Time. So that was already a good, 2.5 hours before, or after rather, the deadline had passed. And that's actually something I speculated on in my video that I published about 12 hours ago. I said, look, obviously, this document was filed on October 2nd. I already showed that to you. Here it is. Attorney Filan shared it. There's the October 2nd date on your screen right here at the top. And so I saw that, and I read the documents. It said, hey, 14 days, based on the date that it was filed. So I was like, okay, so then even if day one is October 3rd, that would still put you at October 16th. But if they're going to count it, the filing, as when it appears within this electronic record on October 3rd, I was like, or 4th, I was like, that could push it back. I speculated that, but I was like, I'm not so confident that's the case. Turns out that's not the case either. That's not what was going on. And so we got the update here. Here was the post from Fox Business journalist Eleanor Terrett. This is at 8:26 a.m. Central Time. And she did hear back from the SEC. She wrote, new, heard back from the SEC this morning. According to a spokesperson, and this is a quote from a spokesperson working at the SEC, the appeal is proceeding normally and the documents will be filed publicly soon. End quote. Oh, is that correct? So I read that and I was like, oh, you've got to be freaking kidding me. Okay, so that means, and of course they didn't say anything about a late filing because why would they? They wouldn't admit that boo-boo. They wouldn't want to do that, but it's still proceeding normally. Okay, so that means they did miss the headline, or the deadline rather. Now, it's funny that they say the appeal is proceeding normally. Oh, okay. So filing but missing the deadline, that's normal for you? Okay, SEC, good job there. You tried hard. Brad Garlinghouse responded to that and he wrote, proceeding normally for an agency that makes up their own rules as they go. Okay, so that's a pretty clear indication. Like Brad Garlinghouse would not be writing that if we and they had the wrong understanding of the deadline as October 16th. No. Again, 99.999% chance that indeed the deadline was October 16th by all accounts. I can't find any reputable source 12 hours later that says it was not October 16th. So I'm leaving that tiny less than a 0.1% chance just in case something wacky happens. But it seems to me like a virtual certainty. Absolutely. That really was the deadline. October 16th. I mean, if Brad Garlinghouse is saying this and all the other reputable attorneys that we all follow in this space are like, yeah, that was it, then I think that was it. And the SEC, of course, proceeding as normal. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that very important piece of information. Frickin' idiot sticks. And here we had, I thought this was a funny response to this. This is from Neil Hartner. He's a Ripple employee. And so he responded to Eleanor Tarrant here, and he said, their logic is consistent. Investment contracts don't require a contract. Court filings don't require a filing. I thought that was a really good one. That's right. Investment contracts, no, you don't have to have a contract. That's like a huge part of their argument. You don't have to have a contract to have an investment contract. Oh, okay. And court filings don't require a filing. Sadly, it tracks. Here's a post from John Deaton's crypto law organization. He wrote in response to this, apart from the chaos of the filing, Gary Gensler should give up on this appeal. The higher this case goes, the closer it gets to the Supreme Court of the United States, the more dangerous Gensler's failed legacy becomes for the SEC's authority. This is a rogue chairman actively wrecking an agency. Spot on, crypto law. And then we had this post from attorney James Murphy, aka Meta Lawman. Now, this was posted at 7:51 a.m. Central Time this morning. So this was before we got that update from Eleanor Tarrant in which the SEC said, no, we're proceeding as normal. We're just a bunch of idiot sticks, blah, 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 blah. It was before that, but he had some insight, and it certainly holds up even just these hours later. So here was his perspective. Ripple appeal update. I could be wrong, but I believe the deadline for the SEC to file the Form C passed at midnight last night. This could indicate, and then he cites several things that it could indicate, A, a screw-up by the SEC, B, a technical glitch with the electronic filing system, C, a decision by the SEC to abandon its appeal, or D, an agreement with Ripple to drop both appeals. C seems unlikely to me, and again, C would be the decision by the SEC to abandon its appeal. So he says, that seems unlikely. C seems unlikely to me because an appellant, the SEC, would almost never unilaterally abandon an appeal where a cross appeal has been filed without first reaching an agreement with the cross appellant, Ripple, that they would also drop their cross appeal. Otherwise, the appellant SEC faces the worst of all worlds. Only downside exposure from the cross appeal. Okay, so I'll pause to note, that was one of my questions from last night. I said, okay, even if this is the case, whether this gets dismissed because the SEC failed to file by a deadline, whether that's the case, or in the highly unlikely event that they change their minds, they just don't want to appeal. I was sitting there, well, actually, I wrote it out loud and I was talking about it. What does that mean for Ripple's cross appeal? They still get to cross appeal, right? And it turns out the answer is yes. They still get to cross appeal, even if that were the case. But that's why he's saying it's unlikely. Why would the SEC do that? Because the only reason Ripple cross appealed at all is because the SEC did it first. That was it. I don't think for a moment Ripple would have done that if not. And so then why would they take theirs back and then let Ripple proceed with theirs? There is only potential downside. So he's obviously right about that. And then Attorney Murphy says, my calculation of the deadline follows from a recognition that the notice of appeal was filed on October 2nd. The filing date is what matters under the federal appellate rules. Intervening holidays and weekends don't change the deadline. Okay, so I'll pause to say again, it's just yet another attorney, well respected for good reason within our community, saying that's the date that matters. So anybody else that was saying October 3rd, October 4th, those were the dates that you'd count from, that was incorrect. And so I'm glad that we were working as a community to figure this out. It's not to dig on people, but I'm just highlighting all of the attorneys, and this is what I saw from just about every attorney under the sun, was October 2nd is the date that you have to pay attention to. You cannot ignore the date that is October 2nd. And then the counting starts the next day, October 3rd, which brings you through the deadline, which is October 16th, not the 17th, not the 18th. There we go yet again. And so then he says ramifications. The Form C itself says that failure to file it by the deadline means the appeal will be dismissed. The Second Circuit's local rules, however, say that failure to file the Form C by the deadline means the appeal may be dismissed. Not legal advice. If I got any of this wrong, I will repost this with a correction. Okay, yeah, and so there's certainly nothing to correct at this point. So we can rule out C. Like, there's pretty much, I mean, why would the SEC abandon its appeal? I mean, plus we already know that they already stated that, of course, they're going forward with it. And then as far as D, an agreement with Ripple to drop both appeals, well, obviously that's not the case because we got that comment from Ripple. So that leaves us with A or B. So B would be a technical glitch with the electronic filing system. I think there's about a 0% chance of that at this point, especially with this much time having passed, which leaves us with A screw up by the SEC. They actually didn't file. And so it's almost a 100% chance that is the case. It's hilarious, but not in a good way. I mean, what can you say? Sometimes all you can just do is laugh with ridiculous situations that the SEC puts everybody. Like, what am I even to say about this? You know. And so then there was also this. Here's Attorney Fred Rispoli's response to this. He said, in response to what the SEC stated, no, it's just proceeding normally. Attorney Rispoli said, translation, oh crap, we miscalendared the deadline and got to get that file now. Somebody responded to him named Axis on social media platform X and wrote, the language in these documents need to be changed if the appeal is allowed to be filed late and proceed. Instead of will be dismissed to could be dismissed. Otherwise, it's pointless to have a deadline at all. More or less just a soft due date. And so here's what he's referencing. It's shared by XRP community member Sherry, who I believe is an attorney. For those of you that care to look at your screen, this is what he's referencing. It says, please note, if you do not comply with these requirements within 14 days, your appeal will be dismissed. And so that's understandably why a lot of us, especially us non-lawyer types, because I'm not a lawyer, we're like, oh, okay, well, that seems pretty firm. But then right after this, the print that's not bold, it says, see local rule 12.1. That's where you get the exceptions to the please note here. Yeah, there are exceptions, sadly. So it's like, okay, well, why are we even writing it like that then? Well, Attorney Rispoli has the answer to that. He says, you need to realize that it's a form aimed at the lowest common denominator, pro se litigants, no attorney. Pro se litigants are notorious for not following the procedural rules because they don't know they exist, and courts use forms to scare them into looking for them. Literally, right after the word dismissed on the form is the reference to local rule 12.1, which is clear that a judge has ultimate authority to dismiss or keep the case alive. So that logic does sadly make sense if it is just a scare. I mean, yeah, you'd like it to be, in stone. We would prefer that in this particular instance, but there are reasons in life that when it comes to rules in place in various systems, including businesses, including sometimes the government, there are shades of gray, and sometimes the fact that there's shades of gray and leaving room for interpretation for individuals in the process, that can be a good thing here. So that probably broadly makes sense. We just in the XRP community don't want them to have that wiggle room because we despise them and they're a bunch of asshat pricks. That's what's actually going on here. And of course, we rightly believe that they are asshat pricks. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's a factual statement. It's not even an opinion at this point. It's objective reality. Oh man, it is what it is here, though. So that's where we're at. Don't count on the appeal getting dismissed here. It technically could happen. It's true. It could happen. Judge Torres could be like, nope, ain't happening. I don't think that's likely to occur here, though. Just because they made this little boo-boo in the filing, I have a feeling they're going to get a free pass on this one. I really do. I hope not, because that would be freaking incredible. But it looks like, because look, here's the thing, like, this isn't something that that could have been ignored, except for when it got to this point. Like this appeal, so there's the interlocutory appeal from a year ago. Judge Torres chose to not allow that. This one cannot be ignored, but since it got to this point, my understanding is technically it could now. I just don't think that it will. So that's where we're at right now. Completely ridiculous, but this is real life. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.